Someone is there who is managing the order of life. He is God. Someone is there who is managing the order of life. He is God. He is invisible, still he can be seen. He is God, he is God, he is God, he is God. He keeps eyes and ears too. He knows even the intentions. The one who is illuminated in our subconscious minds. He is God, he is God, he is God, he is God. Do not search for him in the idols. He is in the changing seasons. The one who is changing day to night and night to day. He is God, he is God, he is God, he is God. Someone is there who is managing the order of life. He is God. That was an ode titled He is God, or Wohi Khuda Hai. I read to you the English lyrics, but it's originally written in Urdu by the great Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. Today we're speaking about life, we're speaking about motivation, and a little bit about the hereafter. Speaking with us today is a guest who, in my opinion, is someone who has a deep admiration of life. His name is Hassan Ahmad, and he's a fourth-year undergraduate science student at the University of Toronto. He volunteered in Palestine in the summer, and he wants to share his experience of Palestine with us. In my conversation with him offset, he did mention the struggles that he witnessed there, and the struggles are very real. But in courageous, beautiful words, he said to me, life exists there. People are born, people die, they live. It took him motivation to go, and he has come back with a renewed sense of motivation and a mission in life. He wants people to visit Palestine and see it for themselves. So let's talk to Hassan about his experience of Palestine. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. That was a spectacular intro. Very nicely done.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. And people's stories only add more to the things that I have to say, so if it was spectacular, it's probably because I was touched with the conversation we had offset. So thank you.
Thank you.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. And the scriptwriter, she wanted me to start our conversation with a verse from the Quran. So I'm going to say the verse, and then you can just tell us how it relates to something that you learned after your visit in Palestine in the summer.
For sure.
Okay, so the verse is verse 64 from chapter 29. Chapter 29. The title of the chapter is Al-Ankabut, or the spider. Okay, so God says, "And this worldly life is not but diversion and amusement, and indeed the home of the hereafter, that is eternal life, if only they knew." So when you listen to that verse, what would you say? How does it relate to something that you learned?
Yeah, so you just mentioned very nicely that that we tend to forget sometimes, I feel like, the purpose that we serve in this lifetime, and I feel like we get bogged down by daily stressors, and our stressors they make sense according to our society because we're conditioned in a certain way, but they're also very trivial when you compare it to the struggles of people all around the world. And so, making sure you are in check with yourself the entire time, and remind yourself that you're here and you're privileged and you should be grateful for the experiences you have, I think is very important, because at the end of the day, it doesn't entirely matter what we gain while we're here. We all started off the same, and we're all going to end off the same way, right? And I think I really, was able to see that, in person when I was in Palestine recently.
Wow. So can you please explain the volunteer opportunity? Who did you go with? How did you get the opportunity? And what were you doing there as a volunteer?
Sure. So I was actually last summer, I was looking into some humanitarian projects around the world because it's something that I've always wanted to do. And so one of my friends, actually, who I went on this trip with, is also a friend of mine from U of T, he discovered this opportunity in Palestine. And so we found this organization called Project Hope, which basically is an organization that functions in Nablus, which is the place that I was living in Palestine. And it is like an NGO that basically works to empower children and adults who are living under the backdrop of the occupation by providing recreational, artistic, and educational programs to youth and to everybody else who lives there. And so we thought it was pretty interesting. And so we looked into it, of course. And so I was gone for 2 weeks via Project Hope, and it was quite a life-altering experience. I don't want to sound cliche, but it kind of was in the experiences
Traveling
that we
can
had.
often be, so I don't think it's...
Right, and it's just, it was a different
general.
kind of traveling because you were on I was sort of on a mission to see what lies beyond what I've seen. I feel like living in Toronto, I feel like sometimes I live in a bubble where, although it's ironic that we come from a diverse community, mashallah, but we live in this sort of society where we only have one sort of homogenous perception of certain things, and I feel like gaining that from this experience really changed the way I look at certain things.
So what were you doing there as a volunteer?
Right, sorry, I forgot to mention that.
No, that's okay.
So I was
That's
there
fine.
for 2 programs actually. I was there for a medical internship where basically we were there, we would go to the refugee camps outside of Nablus, and we did little things like BMI checkups, oral cavity checkups. We measured their blood pressure and their glucose levels, oral cavity, things that a lot of these people have never experienced in their lives. For example, the first day when I brought in the weighing machine to the camp, the kids formed a line because they wanted to jump on this thing and they wanted to know what number I was giving them because they didn't really know what it was. And that moment I was just this is something that I see on the daily in my washroom, and it's just there and we know what it is, but there are people in Palestine in that refugee camp that were mesmerized by this machine that would change dials when they stepped on it, and I was like wow, And then the other thing we did was we actually also taught English there to the university students, and they could converse well, but pronunciation and pronouns and little things like the difference between there and there. So we worked on that with them as well for the 2 weeks.
There was also a social media class you mentioned?
Yeah, so we weren't actually conducting that, but the head of Project Hope told us that, listen, when you come to Palestine in Nablus, bring any skill sets you have and we can create a class out of that. And so I thought that was really cool. There was a volunteer that was there with us who led a social media business marketing class to university students in Nablus.
Wow.
I thought that was so great, So basically any skill sets you have, you bring to them and they're able to, help people in Nablus with that experience.
Wow. A lot of us Muslims, I would say, are pained, they're hurt by the broken governments and poverty that they see in their homelands or in other lands. But not every one of us goes, visits, and volunteers. What was it that pushed you to embark on your journey? What was it that, that encouraged you and you were able to say, I'm going to go to Palestine and I'm going to volunteer?
Right, yeah, very good question, because sometimes we think about these things, but it's hard to really pinpoint what to do. It's actually very ironic. I was studying for the MCAT last year in the summer. It was a very stressful experience, as some might agree. But in that process, I really questioned myself, and I was like, I'm passionate for medicine. I would like to pursue this in the future, but how can I, do something that is for the greater good? And that's when I was like, what? And I've always wanted to go on a humanitarian experience, something that I've always thought was very close to my heart. And so I was like, what? Let me start to look into, places that I can go so I can actually be able to do something, as I said before, outside of my bubble in Toronto, right? And so that's when I came across Palestine. And, Palestine in particular was, spoke to me because I feel like as a kid, we've all, learned so much about them. We've unfortunately prayed for them on many instances.
Yeah.
It's a conflict that I've heard about my entire life.
Yeah, it's like a part of us. You're
right,
You've
exactly.
heard it since you were young.
With the Muslim Ummah, I feel like it's something that we've heard since we were kids, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And so I've always wanted to see what it would be like. And also I wanted to experience a place where the civilization is different from Toronto, and and that was very evident in the loss of freedom they have there, or the inability to have mobility, because of certain restrictions. And so that was very important for me to see. And I was like, you know what? It was difficult, you know, as you can imagine, like coming from a Pakistani background, I come up to my dad one day and I tell him, Baba, I want to go to Palestine. Like that's probably a pretty challenging conversation for a father to have with his son, right?
Yeah.
But you know what? You know, with being able to see that it's actually safe to visit, I really wanted to like clear some misconceptions in my head and also with other people, right? And so that was very important to me, for me to see. And I think it's, you know, it's great for most people to go and see a place like that.
Yeah. And do you see a biased media coverage of Palestine in the West? Are the ground realities different than what's shown on mainstream media? And we can continue this question after the break, because we're going to have to take a break soon. But are the ground realities different than what's shown on mainstream media?
That's a very good question. You know what? I did realize like a lot of censorship in media when I was there. Like, for example, one of the days that we were there, one of the camps we visited actually was raided by some of the forces a couple of days ago. And I only heard about this by word of mouth from the head of Project Hope. But I was like, you know, people were, you know, there was chaos, people were injured, but you know, nobody knows about this, right? And so unfortunately there's a filter that goes through, and there's little control they have over media. And so a lot of people like us sitting in like, you know, the Western world or any part of the world really don't have access to things like this. So, you know, it was, you know, kind of sad to see that. But other than that, like in terms of viewing the West, I feel like when I spoke to individuals there, they seemed to really look at the West as a token of hope. And
so how Palestinians view the West?
Yeah,
okay.
Surprisingly enough, yeah, like they were like, you know what, you internationals are here, and although we wanted to gain experience for personal growth, like for me at least, they want us to be able to help them, you know, spread our message, you know, like for example.
Spread our message.
Yeah.
What's their message?
Their message, well, more specifically, like I think spread the kind of lifestyle they live there, because I feel like when I think of Palestine, and when most people think of Palestine, they think of infrastructure broken down, they think of suffering humans, they think of dust, they think of, you know, broken areas. Like it's a very like, you know, subdued image, right? But like what I wanted to go see was like, and what they wanted us to tell the rest of the world was, that's not what it's like. People live there, you know, people go to school there, people have fun there. Yes, they live under the context of the occupation, and unfortunately they've had to adapt to their situation, but it exists, and they want people to know that, you know, we live here, and you know, we exist. We're not just, you know, unfortunately, like Gaza is a place that is suffering, and you know, inshallah, hopefully one day they'll be able to reach a place where there is peace and harmony. But you know, the rest of Palestine is, you know, it's progressing in a way that most people might not really expect.
Okay, so we're just going to take a break soon. We're going to take a break now, but we'll be sharing more after, so stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching the My Voice show on EOAS with your host Aisha Heather. Before the break, we were speaking with Hassan Ahmad, who is a fourth-year undergraduate science student at the University of Toronto. He's here to share his experience of volunteering in Palestine with us. So Hassan, how has your perspective, and you touched on this a bit, but how has your perspective towards life changed after having experienced Palestine? Like, what did you see? What did you witness? Was there a specific moment that, you know, during your time there that caused you to feel life differently?
100%. One thing that I think comes without saying was gratitude. One of the refugee camps that we visited there, it used to, like, you know, it had a population of 5,000 people, but over the last 30 years, it's grown to 30,000 people. But the land area hasn't changed. And so the population density is crazy. Like people, the difference between houses there is like shoulder length, because that's how less space they have. And a place like that, we were told, only has one doctor for 30,000 people. And so that really hit me, and I was like, wow, like me living in a society in Toronto, I can get up, go out to my family doctor, you know, get better, you know, within a couple of days, and I can do it with ease. But here people, the locals told us to get in line, and they and they give up because the lines are too long, it's too hot outside, and they can't bear it. And so unfortunately there's that level of control. So I learned a lot of gratitude from my experience. And I
that level of control, because they aren't basically able to have more than one doctor in the camp?
Even if they would like to, they don't get to control that. And so unfortunately that's all they're given, and they work with that. Once again, adaptability. It's unfortunate, but they have to sort of live with their circumstances. But yeah, that's one thing that I learned. I think furthermore, like optimism, this is something I didn't expect to learn from the experience, because these people are so optimistic about their future. Like the refugee camps have little keys drawn everywhere, which apparently is supposed to represent that the refugee camp is temporary and they're going to go home one day.
Who draws these keys?
Yeah, apparently the locals that live around the area, they draw keys around the camps because
who live around the camps?
Yeah, and because they feel like, we have keys to get into our homes, and these keys are temporary because we want to return back to our home one day, wherever they're from. And so that was kind of sad to see, but I also learned that it was like, wow, like, how can we be so pessimistic in our life here when people are like that? And then patience as well. Like, I met a local on the street where we were staying, and he sells like little merchandise, like little like ceramics and stuff, and they're based with like Masjid Aqsa stamps on them, like a lot of Masjid Aqsa merch. And he told me, he's like, I've never actually visited this place because I can't. But I sell this merch, and I was like, oh my God, like I'm going to go there soon because I actually got a chance to visit there. But I was like, you live, hours.
You live here.
You live right here, but you aren't able to go because of restrictions and checkpoints and because of stress. And so, but he was very patient. He's like, you know what, Allah has a plan for me, and that's what's going to happen. And so I was very moved by that. And like lastly, one last thing that I learned from the experience was just comparing our life to theirs. Like, I feel like sometimes here we have so much interpersonal conflict between parents, between siblings, people holding grudges for a lifetime. But you have to realize that life is so short, and we're privileged to even have those kinds of problems. Not to say that we should.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a funny thought.
Right? It's kind of funny to think that we shouldn't. We're fortunate to have that, but we shouldn't be having it to begin with.
Yeah.
But there's people in Palestine, who you can't even go from point A to point B without being questioned, without being harassed, or without actually not even reaching there because of restrictions. And so basically overall making sure that we don't take things for granted, I think was very important that I learned in that experience.
And so we can take basic needs for granted.
Right.
And people in places affected by occupation and war can be struggling for basic needs like water, food, and shelter. But there is also an importance of education and activity to life. So what would you say a normal day in a Palestinian family looks like in terms of education and activity? What is the academic and social scene there?
You'd actually be very surprised. It's very similar when it comes to the emphasis on education to the Western world. And I was very surprised as to the career paths people were interested in. We talked to a lot of locals there, and one of the most popular careers that students want to become is graphic designing and social media marketing and like non-traditional careers. And I was very impressed by that. Filmmaking was another one that I discovered there, that people were interested in that. And so parents are investing in their children. They're sending them to Project Hope to learn certain skills that they maybe can't learn in their schools because because of the international presence there. But yeah, that's one thing I learned. I was like, wow. And in terms of the social scene there too, it's quite similar. They have bowling alleys there. We actually went bowling once. They have hookah lounges, pretty popular there. Kunafa was actually founded in Nablus, which is like a dessert. And so a lot of people after school they hit up like a kunafa stop and they just relax and chill. And so I think what I noticed is that I don't want to say that they're desensitized to the occupation, but they've learned to live with it, and they want to they want to just be able to live their life in that context, and they know that that one day inshallah change will come, and but they have to move on, which is commendable to see, because honestly some of these people if they want to leave Palestine, they can't even go through the Tel Aviv airport. They have to go to Jordan first, and then go to the rest of the world from there. So that's something that I was pretty impressed by.
Wow.
So the social scene was actually very nice, and it's very similar to here, just with the backdrop of the occupation.
And so then, I feel a lot of I feel a lot of optimism from you. I can't speak. I feel a lot of optimism from you, but how do you I'm sure at times you may feel overwhelmed, or maybe you felt it in the past, right? Overwhelmed, or feelings of hopelessness and helplessness when you thought about the situation of Palestine, the people of Palestine, maybe especially before you went. You know, what we find happening at times is people shutting down. They might not want to hear news that upsets them, so then they may no longer be involved in current events, which I don't think is necessarily good. So what can we do to deal with feelings of helplessness and hopelessness? What do we do to stay motivated?
That's such a good question, because I feel like you're right. Like before I left on my trip, I felt those emotions, you know, almost every day. And when I got there, almost, you know, it's spearheaded, because you know, when you see things like the wall that separates Israel and Palestine, you feel things that you've never felt before. And so I told myself before I left, I was like, Hassan, remember, everybody in life, you know, is on a journey, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only puts in situations that we're able to overcome. And so that doesn't justify the discrimination that they experience, but it also shows you how strong those people are morally and with their values, because they're able to persevere and go through. So I was reminding myself that, okay, they're being tested in a certain way, you will also be tested in a certain way. You know, maybe our test as an ummah is, like, you know, are we able to help people like that, or do we just, you know, turn a blind side to it? And I think, like you said, like, it's very easy to, because of all the negativity in this world, like, you know, recently with Christchurch and then with Mali, like, there's so much going on in our world that it's so easy to. I think what keeps me motivated and keeps me going is questioning myself and questioning, like, privilege. I think sometimes I think to myself that, okay, I'm Hassan, I was born here in Toronto, but there's a kid in Palestine who was born in Nablus who has very different rights that I have, but he doesn't deserve that. You know, he didn't choose that life. We all came from the same clay, the same cloth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made us from. So why is it that I get to have this lifestyle, but somebody else gets to have a different one? And so just that ability to question and be objective, I think keeps me concentrated on major issues. You know, because I feel like if you turn a blind side to it, then it only justifies, you know, the kind of stance you have in the Western world. And so I think being able to, like, talk to yourself about that.
Having a conversation with yourself, asking yourself constructive questions.
Exactly, yeah. Like, you know, like, do they deserve that? They didn't choose that life, but, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them that sort of lifestyle. So we have to be able to understand their perspective and, you know, try to find a way to help them so they reach the same levels that we're at, or at least close to it, right?
So what would you say are our responsibilities as a Muslim when it comes to volunteering?
Honestly, I think first of all, it's something that a lot of people should really consider to do. You know, that doesn't mean you have to go travel across the world, you know, it's not really easy to do sometimes. But, like, I think the most important thing as Muslims that we can gain from volunteering is perception taking. I feel like, and I've learned this in some of my psych courses too, that, you know, the most successful people in the world are the ones that are able to see things from different perspectives, and, you know, because it gives you an open, an outside of the box perspective, and it makes you think from different angles, and that makes you a more clever human being as well. And so I feel like, you know, with opportunities like this, our ummah is so diverse, you know, and for us being able to just, you know, localize ourselves within the people that we see on the daily, we only have one homogenous perception of life. And so I feel like volunteering, whether that be, like, you know, going outside, or even, like, meeting different kinds of people within your community, you know, that gives you a totally different perception, which I think is really beneficial, you know, moving forward in life. And whether that's, you know, volunteering at a soup kitchen nearby, that gives you, you know, interaction with people that have a different perception in life because of what they're going through. Something that you probably don't understand just by looking at pictures or reading. Or if you can, that's great. You know, most people aren't able to do that, right? And so I feel like that perception taking as Muslims is so important. And, you know, there's so many great people out there. It's just that we have to be able to talk to them and understand their perspective for us to be able to see the world in a better place. And then, you know, that would give you motivation to also do more in life.
You're very right about volunteering being like a way to expose yourself to different people and different ideas. I think that's very relevant to like my own experience. Like
Right.
volunteering is
cool.
really helpful. Yeah, because I volunteered at the Alzheimer's Society in London,
Oh,
and a
nice.
lot of like the population there is like white elderly people,
Uh-huh.
and then the community that I grew up in. I've actually lived in the same neighborhood since I was born.
Oh, wow.
It's mostly Muslims, Desi people, or
Yeah,
Arabs.
I can relate to that too. Yeah.
So just being able to talk to these like elderly people and who are different faith, different
Yeah.
background. And even like I had a companion too, like who was someone who I saw more frequently. I learned so much from him,
Right.
and it did make me think about things differently. And
Yeah.
it's a wonderful.
I think it's so important, and
Yeah.
you don't even realize the benefit until you walk out of the experience.
Yeah.
You look back and reflect, like, wow, I just learned that, and I couldn't have done that unless I took this sort of step, right?
Okay, so what is your message to the viewers who are concerned about the situation of Palestine, but are a little lost or unsure in knowing how to help?
Right. So I know like it's difficult for everyone to be able to travel and do these kinds of experiences. Like if you're able to visit Palestine, that would be spectacular. Feel free to connect with me as well. I can definitely give you some guidance on that. And I'm also thankful to my parents, to like let me go on this kind of experience. It's probably daunting for a parent to think about it like this.
That's true.
But other than that, I feel like there are certain things you can do to learn more about the conflict, which will motivate you to hopefully take different steps. For example, like one of the volunteers that I met on the trip, her name is Catherine N, and she's actually developed this new page via a project, and she actually has lived in Palestine for quite some time now, and it's called Behind Closed Doors. And she basically does like a Humans of Palestine sort of thing, and basically it explores everybody, a lot of people she visits, she explores their story online. And so you can definitely check that out on Facebook. I think it's very interesting. And she's also set up a GoFundMe page at the moment, because she's actually trying to create a playground for children who live with the occupation near Hebron. And so if you can help support that, that would be spectacular. They have unfortunately, with places like that, funding is very scarce, and it's based on, the government and, international donors really. And so I think that if you want to help in some monetary way, that would be spectacular.
That's really nice, a playground for children.
Yeah, a playground, because children living under the occupation, it's very stressful because they don't get those opportunities that maybe children in other parts of the world get, right? And so I think that was very important. And other than that, making sure that I think just reevaluate, even without being able to go there, just reevaluate your life. If you can just make a difference within your own life with gratitude, I feel like you're at least contributing to them, as opposed to, if you're unable to travel, actually have interaction with them. Just, reevaluate your principles, your needs, your wants, right? And I think that if we can do that, I think it's the little things in Palestine, I witnessed that they have a shortage of water, or water is controlled by Israeli forces, and so you have to, the water pressure is very little, but we managed to survive 2 weeks there. They managed to survive on the daily with that, right? So little things we can implement in our life that would be able to help inadvertently people in Palestine.
Wow.
So I think that's one way of looking at it.
Wow, that's really beautiful.
No,
all right, so thank you so much, Hassan, for coming, and thank you for the responsibility that you feel in sharing what you learned after
Thank you
visiting.
for asking me to come on this show. It was a spectacular experience.
Yeah. All right, and thank you to all of you for tuning in. You can visit us on our website at myvoicecanada.com, and until next time, from the EOS studio with My Voice.